I would love to introduce Dr. André Laplume, Professor Ted Rogers School of Management. And he's going to talk about employee entrepreneurship, spin-out ventures, and the future of work. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Laplume to you. And over to you, André.
Yes, thank you for that introduction, and thanks to all of us who are joining us today. I'm Andre, and I'm a professor at Toronto Metropolitan University. I've been doing research for about 7 or 8 years now on a topic called spin-out ventures, and we've actually just recently published a book with the same title. Well, I think you can't quite see it there, but it says spin-out ventures, right? So it's all fresh in my mind, and I want to tell you a story that that hopefully will convince you that spin-out ventures are very much a part of the future of work. And I think that story has to start in the past. And if we think about entrepreneurship as a field and what people have been researching in entrepreneurship for a long time, it all started with the what we call the de novo startup, or a fresh company that starts up, often with entrepreneurs who are founders who may not have necessarily have experience, but they start a business anyway, and you see an economy. If you think about an economy in the past, with a large number of small competitors, lots of small firms, small entrepreneurs competing in the economy. But then what happened over time is that a lot of those companies started to merge together, and some acquired others. And we ended up in a very different situation today, where in most developed economies, most industries are represented by a smaller number of large companies, which has very much changed the nature of competition, and has changed, I think, the nature of capitalism. And the important way that that's changed things for entrepreneurship is that the focus shifted from the entrepreneur, out there alone in the market trying to start a new company, more toward the intrapreneur. So that's the individual who's working in a large company, and who's deciding to do innovation, or to start an internal corporate venture within an existing company. And so a lot of the attention turned to intrapreneurs, because it seemed like in the developing economies, a lot of the action in entrepreneurship was actually happening with intrapreneurs internally within organizations. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I mean, one of them is that because of the changes in technology over time and the increasing sophistication of business enterprises, it became increasingly difficult for individuals without significant experience to start ventures on their own. Right. I mean, it still happens, but it's not the main mode of entrepreneurial venture creation today. But fast forward to the current state, and we still have a circumstance of some people call it oligopoly type situation in many industries. Although some industries are much more competitive than others, and depending on the jurisdiction and what. But a lot of the intrapreneurship is happening within the large companies, and it's gotten to the point where a lot of these companies have too many ideas. They don't even know what to do with them. They can't commercialize them all. These big incumbent organizations, they need to focus on just a couple of key businesses so that they can really be successful with those businesses. And so what's happening is as companies invest in innovation and R&D and internal corporate ventures, there's a lot of we call them surplus ideas, or ideas that the companies can't actually utilize themselves. And so that's what's led to this next stage in entrepreneurship, which I want to talk to you about today, which is the spin-out ventures. So just to be as precise as I can be here, when I'm talking about spin-out ventures, I'm talking about startups that are founded by former employees of incumbent corporations. Okay, so this is not the same thing as you might have heard other term, like, for example, corporate spin-off, which refers to a managerial decision by an incumbent to take a unit and make it into a separate corporation, right? And in that case, you see that in finance, or you see that in the stock market, where they create a new stock ticker for the new company, and actually the shares in the company or the new company are issued to the owners of the parent company. Okay, so the difference here with a spinout is not a conscious decision necessarily by managers of the company. It's independent employees that sometimes it could be one person or it could be small teams. Sometimes there's even larger teams that decide to leave together and they form an independent company, which is not owned by the parent organization. Right? It's completely independent. Okay, and that's what we're seeing more and more of that. Actually, in entrepreneurship, one of the main theories now is the knowledge spillover theory of entrepreneurship, right? Which acknowledges that many of the best startups are those which are founded upon ideas and knowledge which actually leaked out of existing organizations. Okay, so I want to talk just a little bit more about these spinouts. There's lots of interesting reasons why spinouts happen. The most traditional trigger, let's call it, is a strategic disagreement, right? Where a group of employees or an employee, they disagree with the management or the dominant coalition within an organization about the direction that the company should go. So, for example, maybe the employees think that it's really important to start using, I don't know, AI, for example, in the venture or new technology, and maybe the managers don't want to, and that creates a strategic disagreement. So, and sometimes it goes the other way. Sometimes it's the employees that want to use the old technology or keep using the older technology, and the management wants to pursue the newer, riskier technology. Right. So there's lots of these disagreements that can trigger spinouts. But there are also much more mundane things, like, for example, just managerial frictions or interpersonal conflicts that happen within organizations that can be triggers. Sometimes companies are acquired and there's a change in management and a change in corporate culture, and that can end up being a trigger. There's so many different reasons. Actually, we get into it in some detail, but and one that I want to touch on here is sometimes it's the ethical situation within the parent organization or the employer's organization that it does a trigger, and I think that's an interesting one because it fits well with this idea of sustainable businesses, and some of these ethical triggers may be around the business practices relating to the environment. For example, the oil drillers that turn to geothermal drilling as an alternative career pathway and forming a spin out to do that. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. So there's I think a large diversity of reasons why people leave to start their own ventures. But because the theme today is the future of work, and I want to talk about three major trends. Okay, three major trends that are happening. That I think trends that happen over a long period of time, but which are all pointing in the same direction, which is more spin-out ventures. They're already very prevalent. We know that roughly 9 out of 10 entrepreneurs had some kind of experience. And we know that about 70% of them use an idea that they got from previous employment in their venture, right? So they're already quite prominent, but I don't think it's not that well known that they're so prominent. And they're actually also quite successful because one of the things that makes them successful is that they tend to bring some inherent resources, or sometimes it's routines. There's the learning environment of their employer makes it possible for the employees to better understand the stakeholders involved in the business, or to see opportunities that develop, and sometimes opportunities that develop that the parent organization maybe doesn't want to pursue. Right. So there's all kinds of advantages to doing spinouts, and they are quite common, but I think they're going to become even more common. And I'm going to tell you about these three trends. So the first trend is I'll start with the non-compete ban. So maybe you guys heard that the last week the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, they decided to ban non-competes nationally for all employees, excluding executives. So executives will still have their non-competes enforced. And I think that was a long time coming. About 10 years ago, there was a scandal around Jimmy John's, the sandwich company that was making its sandwich workers sign non-compete agreements, right? And that created a lot of, I think, frustration, and perhaps now we're finally seeing this change in the law in the United States in response to that. And that's relevant. The non-competes are quite relevant because it's been one of the barriers to a lot of employee entrepreneurs who may have signed, a lot of employees sign non-competes as part of their employment contracts, right? And so if their intention is to do a spin-out venture, sometimes that spin-out venture competes with the parent firm. Often they don't. And sometimes they can become customers of the parent firm, or they can become suppliers of the parent firm. But other times they do compete, sometimes indirectly and sometimes directly with the parent organization. And there's this looming chilling effect or threat of litigation for those who have signed non-competes, which has now been removed, I think, for the vast majority of workers in the United States and other places as well. This is a trend that's happening, I think, globally. Ontario, for example, in Canada here, banned non-competes just over a year ago. Just a couple of years ago, Hawaii had effectively banned competes for tech workers, right? And that's been a recognition. Governments around the world are recognizing that allowing employers to restrict the mobility of their employees is not a good thing for the economy. It restricts wages and it also reduces entrepreneurship, and we have evidence of that as well. Now, non-competes being banned is not necessarily a panacea for spin-out ventures, because often there are other restrictions that remain in place. For example, non-solicitation agreements, which prevent leavers from taking other employees or customers with them when they go to start their ventures. And they can also be bound by things like non-disclosure agreements that can make it difficult to replicate intellectual property or to use intellectual property of the parent firm without a proper license, right? So there's lots of other mechanisms in place, including things like fiduciary duties as well, which usually affect mostly more senior managers and things like that, that can prevent them from doing spinouts. But what we're seeing is a trend in the direction of institutions that are more enabling and more beneficial toward spin-out ventures. And another, I think, very similar, on a similar vein, another major trend, that we're seeing is move towards more open innovation. Okay, and I think that's maybe even more pronounced in the tech industries than anywhere else. A lot of workers, when they're working on different software, different innovations, they want to be able to publish some of that code, some of those innovations in open repositories, right? So that it can be shared with others, because, a lot of the non-core technology stuff is not that sensitive to be able to share in it. And you can also build reputation sharing innovations that way. And it also makes it possible not to trap those innovations trapped within one organization, right? So if the employees want to leave and pursue some of those innovations, well, they have access to those open source files on the repository that they can continue to use, right? So a lot of companies are seeing that as embracing open innovation, not only as a way to, usually they're embracing it as a way to improve their own performance or improve their own innovations, right? And it also makes it possible for them to hire better human resources, right? Because people want to work for organizations that embrace these principles. And one example, is actually, we're using Zoom here. Zoom is a spin-out example. The founder of Zoom was working at Cisco on their WebEx technology, and he left to found Zoom. And over time, of over 40 employees from Cisco actually followed and went to work at Cisco. At Zoom, right? So, and part of the story is that not only was the founder's reputation at play in attracting all those people, but also it was possible to construct the Zoom technology because a lot of the code and the technology that was needed was available on open repositories, because Cisco had a reputation for allowing that open innovation within its organization. Okay, so open innovation as a trend, it's a trend that's positive for spinouts, because it makes it easier for spinouts to form and to transfer the knowledge that they need in order to be successful. Okay. So the next major trend I want to talk about, and this one perhaps is the most important one. I mentioned earlier that one of the problems is normalizing this idea of spinouts, because perhaps because of the non-compete age, a lot of people have thought that it's just not an avenue, right? It's just not something that you do, or that there's some problem with it, a loyalty problem with it, or maybe it's illegal or something like that. So lots of people have misconceptions about spinouts. And of course, the ones that have perhaps the most misconceptions are sometimes the managers of the incumbent firms. And there's been a history of incumbent organizations that have been hostile towards spinouts, including pursuing litigation or blacklisting or doing other types of activities to try to suppress spinouts or to create an example out of them to try to deter future spinouts and things like that. So, in the past, there has been sometimes spinouts have been given labels like treacherous or parasites or other negative labels, often by people within the parent organizations that are trying to stop them. But the trend, I think, the interesting trend here is that a lot of parent companies now, a lot of incumbent firms are starting to embrace spinouts because they're starting to see the value that spinouts bring. And I'll just mention, so some of those benefits, reputational benefits for one thing. I think, when prospective employees see that spinouts are coming out of an organization, like Palantir is a famous example. They have so many spinouts and it's very visible. They brag about it, and a lot of people want to go and work for Palantir because they see that as a great place to develop their career, even if it goes in an entrepreneurial direction, right? But also the parent companies, they learn from their spinouts. So a big company, company like Palantir might have dozens of spinouts out there working on different innovations, and some of them end up coming back. Some of them end up being acquired by the parent company. Some of the employees leave the spinout to come back to the parent company. So there's this kind of two-way exchange of information and knowledge that's made possible between the spinouts and parent firm that creates benefits as well. But I think the one of the core benefits of allowing spinouts is this idea that that you want to have innovations in the parent firm, but most companies can't pursue all of the innovations that they create. So rather than suppressing innovations, right, or allowing innovations to sort of die on the shelf along with the ambitions of the people who are working on them within the company, right, that companies are having a more positive attitude towards spinouts, sometimes even encouraging them. So an example of that would be AstraZeneca, where they've done such a good job of innovating internally that they really can't exploit all the innovations they create. So they actually have a coordinator whose job is to go out there and find external investors who want to help spin out some of those innovations. And they actually do a deal where they allow the whole team that was working on the innovation to leave along with the venture seamlessly, and also the IP that's relevant to that innovation as well, in exchange for a 20% stake, right? Which is nowhere near a controlling stake, right, for a startup, right? So this is one approach. Another company, Nokia, for example, they had a very different approach during a downturn that they experienced in their business. They were faced with the prospect of shutting down a whole division, and so rather than just shutting it down and laying off all of the workers, what they decided to create a spin-out program themselves, and they encouraged hundreds of their employees to take ideas that had been developed within that division of the organization and to spin it out into new companies, and even provided some bridge financing to support them, and as well as entrepreneurial education to make sure that the leavers had the tools that they would need to start their venture when they did go. Okay, so those are just some those are some examples of parent firms that have, I guess, seen the light and who are actively encouraging spinouts. There's lots of other examples as well. Some are different. So Intel, for example, they also have a reputation for encouraging spinouts of anything that wasn't related to their core business, because their leadership, they believed that really the company could only focus on one or two things at a time, and really anything else was really a distraction. And so they'd rather see that, especially any kind of process technologies, be developed externally, right? So different companies have different approaches, but the understanding of spinouts can be beneficial is starting to spread, and I think that's good. That's good for the companies. And it's also good for the employees who are thinking about starting a venture, but maybe aren't aware of their rights or aren't aware of how prevalent spin-out ventures really are. Okay, so I think that the direction that we're headed, if you think about the future of capitalism, right, starting back at the beginning, where when we started researching entrepreneurship, it was all about a small number of a large number of small competitors fighting it out, keeping prices low. If you go all the way back to Adam Smith's description of what ideal capitalism should be, that's what it was. He literally used those words, a large number of small producers, right? But over time, as we've seen development of capitalism towards oligopolies and larger firms that dominate markets, and now multinational companies that dominate global markets, we're very far away from that ideal of capitalism. And I think that perhaps regulators around the world are finally starting to wake up to this.
Hello. Looks like there is a little bit of technical issue there. We'll try to see if Andre can come back on to wrap up his session. Do give us a couple minutes. We'll see if we can move forward with it. Just a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Yeah. So
Andre,
I
are you
want mine
back?
there. Should I continue for a couple
Yes,
minutes?
Jeff, yes. I was just wondering if I lost you there, but please do.
Okay. Yeah, I think I had a home internet failure. Um,
You have
Speaking of
the
oligopoly situation, we only have 2 or 3 internet providers in the province. But anyway, so I think where I was going with this is that, because of the sophistication of businesses today, the garage entrepreneurship idea where, the college dropouts or anyone could just kind of develop the next big venture independently, that idea doesn't really resonate much anymore. Um, the reality is that to be competitive, entrepreneurs need to learn a lot about how to do business, and the best way to do that is actually to have experiences working in incumbent organizations. In fact, we found that the best experiences are when employees have a chance to work on sort of exploratory projects as well as exploiting some of those innovations within the incumbent organization, right? So if they have a chance to do this kind of entrepreneurship, then it really gives them a leg up when they leave the firm to do their own venture, right? So because of these 3 trends that I've mentioned today, that I think we'll see some new trends as well. I think it's fair to say that the future of work and the future of capitalism is very much going to be about spin-out ventures. So I encourage everyone to learn more about it. Look into spin-out ventures on your own. There's also a book which we recently published if you want more information about it. But I think that I wanted to take the occasion today to talk about spin-out ventures to everyone, because I think the more that it becomes normalized and the term becomes normalized, then I think the more employees turned entrepreneurs that we're going to see. Thank you.
great, great. Thank you, Andre. So I think one question that I did have, I think just based off, very insightful, but the question I had was, are there any general support networks or resources that folks could go to if they were thinking of that journey themselves? Like if they were looking at getting on that spin out journey on their own, are there any general resources available that they could reach out to? Do you recommend any at all for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, that's why we wrote the book because, we did research on this for 7 years and we couldn't find a good general resource. Most of the startup books that are out there are really about, hey, finding a new idea or discovering an opportunity and how to sort of shape that. But the thing about Spinout Ventures is a lot of these employees already have an idea that they've been validated within the incumbent organization. So for them, they're less concerned about this process of, hey, do I have the right idea? And they're more concerned with the process of executing on the actual business side.
Okay.
Right. So really that's why we wrote this book, to help people to execute, and to feel good about, what it is that they're doing, because actually that's the main mode that new startups are created today is by employees leaving and sometimes taking a team with them to form a startup. Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing you mentioned, of course, the FTC ruling, that was a big one. I think it's going to hit a lot of big companies, especially with, the ones who have a very restrictive non-compete as part of their process. I think it's going to hit them very bad. But I'm assuming there's going to be a lot of legal counters to that FTC ruling. What do you think? I mean, are non-competes gone forever, or do you think they're still going to be coming back at some point?
Well, I do think they're gone forever in their current form. I think they'll stick around for executives, but usually those are wrapped around the fiduciary duties of executives, which are a bit different, right? Because they have access to really the jewels of the crown, right? So there are more restrictions on them. But as I said earlier, unfortunately, it wasn't just the non-competes that mattered. For instance, if you want to take a team with you, a non-solicitation could affect you as well, as some, taking employees with you when you leave can may violate a non-solicitation. And they're also, trade secrets are protected with non-disclosure agreements, right?
Yes.
And patents also protect intellectual property, and so do copyrights and trademarks. And so there's lots of other restrictions that leavers need to be aware of and make sure that they don't infringe upon when they start their own business. But I do think that non-competes, have come to an end, at least in North America. And they, we're seeing also, I think we'll, in the last few years in China, for example, almost 50% of new contracts being signed by employees in China have a non-compete in, right? So as fast as the trend of non-compete signing spread across the world, I think also cancellation or its restriction will also start to spread across the world as well.
Okay.
That's my take on it.
Sure. Yeah, appreciate that. But thank you so much for coming in and doing this. We really appreciate it. I think a lot of cool points. I'll definitely look out for the book as well. And I'm sure there's a lot of folks in the audience who might be interested in reading it up as well, because it's been pretty interesting. I think the way the journey begins and how they scale up and all that, super cool and interesting. So really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.